If you are a human on the earth, you have probably fallen to the trap of the illusion of progress in a good way and a bad way. And what a lot of people don't realize is small wins drive buyers to take action, and small wins inside of a program will actually increase retention. So on today's episode, we're actually going to dive into the illusion of progress. How can you utilize this inside your business? And also, how does this look as a sales strategy as well as you're coming into the new year? As always, if you haven't subscribed, rate, go ahead and do so. What it allows us to do is to reach more listeners, continue to do the podcast because this is 100% self-funded. There is no external funding, and it allows me to really dive into these episodes that y'all know and love. So here is the thing that a lot of people don't talk about but experience, and it's the illusion of progress, or it's the idea of how progress is projected inside of our brains. I am someone who, when I got into the online space, I was finishing courses, I was carving out time. Like, I was used to self-education because I went to college. And recently, actually, I saw the college that I went to, I saw the internal structure of it, and it's way better than I was there, because when I went to college online, this was before COVID, it was very bare bones. It was an adult working program, and you kind of had to teach yourself. And it was a blessing and a curse, because I feel like I took out more of my college education than my peers because I was having to spend more time researching and writing, and that set me up exponentially as a business owner, where some of my peers inside the online space or just in the traditional space did not have to do that. The illusion of progress is something I started to experience in college when I would get ahead on my work and I would be closer to quote unquote finishing the class, because we wrote papers and you could turn your papers in early and you could finish your class kind of early, and then it was something that it would keep the momentum, right? Because momentum is really important in our brains, because motivation is not a precursor. It actually comes from taking action and getting the dopamine hit and then having the sustained focus. And when it comes to teaching inside the online space, what was traditionally valued was these big wins at the end of programs. And as someone who teaches sales and came in with a sales background, I always felt that it was super backwards that we were learning sales in like weeks 6 and 8 and not learning it in 1 and 2, and how that could move people in the direction. I read Motivation is a Myth. I would honestly not recommend it as a book. I think it's a lot of just regurgitation around a lot of motivation theory. But something about motivation theory is that you have internal, external. You also have internal that is driven by morals and kind of peer pressure. And external pressure is something we see a lot of in the online space, because there's that external motivation and groupthink, which is kind of, it's not outsourcing your opinion, but it kind of is outsourcing your opinion, is where a lot of people get stuck, because you have the intrinsic motivation of wanting to do something, and that's going to be sustained more over time. But the thing about humans is that, like, we're always intrinsically motivated, and so the illusion of progress goes hand in hand with motivation, and that's where I think a lot of people struggle to structure their programs properly, is because they're not implementing these small wins. And the small wins have to be something that is tangible. It has to be a feeling that creates a dopamine release. When it comes to implementing progress and having the illusion of progress, you have to have other pieces inside of it. So this is going to be checklists. It's going to be a place for them to share their wins. It's also going to be gamification, which gamification is something that I've started to explore in the new year and how to use it, because someone who grew up in the educational game testing world, gamification is used very heavily in education, but we're starting to see it come into business. And I also game. I don't think a lot of people know this about me, is that I'm not like gaming on a laptop. I play on my Switch, or I have a little game on my phone that still makes me a gamer. But gamification is really important when we're considering it, because they don't just throw you into this hardest level and make you figure it out. The difficulty increases substantially to the progress that you're making. And sometimes when you start a game, it's really easy and you see these really big wins, and then you kind of get to a point where your skills are matching where you're at in the game, whether it's strategy or just the skills of like your specific player and those types of things. And the thing with this specifically, I've also seen in the online space, is that there's a lot of information inside of programs, but there's not a lot of ways to go through it. So something that I did, this would have been 2 years now, is I built a spreadsheet. And inside the spreadsheet, it lists out every module. It allows you to create deadlines. It tells you when you need to do it by. It tells you your action step. It tells the correlating workbook. And this was something that I started to see more engagement in my clients and them repeating back to me what they were learning inside the modules, which I don't teach to modules inside a mission income, but inside a scale to 5K, or if you're taking buyer psych or down in the DMs, or sometimes if you're in mission income and you need to learn that other thing, I'm going to make you go watch a module versus teaching, because that is also a part of being a business owner. The thing with this, though, is that engagement's going to increase with that, because you're also going to have different types of people who are different buyers are going to be creating a group dynamic. Group dynamics are not talked about a lot in the online space, and I think it's a disservice to group programs, because what I see is a lot of this very homozygous personality inside the online space come into a program, and then it's all like that in a program, and it doesn't really round it out, because you have to think about the Air Force study that I've referenced a few times, where at the Air Force Academy, they randomly select cadets and put them in squadrons, and you're in a squadron for the next 4 years. For the first 2 years that you're at the Air Force Academy, you're not actually allowed to go off base. And so, unless you have like a sponsor family, and you can go see your sponsor family. But when they took out the randomization and they paired people around the same progress level with each other, they found that people weren't making the substantial improvements. And they also found that people who were high performing continued to perform highly. But in this group of high performers, it was not that they were seeing substantial progress with it, but there was still that motivation to continue to perform. But when we had these randomized groups where it was a high performer, a low performer, a medium performer, and it was kind of this mixed collection, the high performers would actually slow down to meet them. And this is something that also kind of reminds me of Irish twin syndrome. If you've never heard of Irish twin syndrome, it's basically there's less than 18 months between a boy. The boy has to be older, and a girl. They're siblings, and the boy will slow down where the girl will speed up to meet progress and meet in kind of the middle. The reason I know this is because I'm an Irish twin. But coming back to the groups and those pieces, with that randomization of the group, the illusion of progress is really important to have people who are getting progress and encouraging other people. So you are always going to have a leadership archetype inside of your group programs. But what perceived progress and motivation do is that your brain doesn't know the difference between the illusion of progress, you getting closer to the goal and more likely to achieving the goal, and the where you're physically at, the reality and the point. And when we have something like mirror neurons inside of our brains, and this is why I brought up groupthink and I brought up having various skill levels inside your group and different personality, when they studied mirror neurons, what they found is that when this researcher came in the lab and he was eating this ice cream cone, the chimpanzee felt like they were also eating an ice cream cone. When you see other people winning, you feel that win inside that program as well, which then motivates you because you have the action, you have the dopamine release, and you're going to go out and do it. It's also kind of this narrative around groupthink of people like us do things like this. And so what a lot of people don't do inside their programs, and why this isn't driving the action, and it's not driving people to buy because you're not sharing the wins, you're not showing what's happening, is giving people an opportunity, one, to always share the wins that they're having. And recently we just tested this, is we actually have an all programs win channel. So I used to have win channel based on programs. We have an all programs win channel. So whether you are in overflow or mission income, scale to 5K is not in Slack. This is in Slack, but you will go in that channel and you will share your win, and people will come in and celebrate you, because that is the nature and the normative of the group. Other people see that, though, whether they're in mission income or in overflow, and they're like, oh, I actually have something else to share, and then they share it, and this allows them to recognize the progress that they're making and then continue to do it, because they also have action steps that they get on their calls, they have inside their programs, and that's the other piece of this. Illusion of progress will allow you to keep more people inside your programs, because what you can do at the end is sell them based on how far they've come. I have a client who just recently signed, and it's really cool to talk about where she was when she joined the program and where she is now, because it's very different for her because of what was going on in her business and how it was able to grow. And so this also allows them to continue to go, because it's like, look at all that I've done, right? There's a book that kind of talks about this a little bit more called The Gap and the Gain. But it's showing all this work they've done. It's showing the wins versus how much more they have to go. So to kind of summarize this and what action steps I can give you, if you are someone who is currently inside of a program and you don't know what you need to do to see success, go ask your coach. Say, what are 3 things I can do this week? Or what are 2 things I can do today? Or what are things that I can consistently do every single day to get to my goal of X? What are some gaps that you see? The second thing is with this specifically, I want you to go inside your programs and make a framework of what your clients are doing and start having an opportunity to check off what it looks like to be able to do this. Now, if you're someone where you're like, I want a really cool spreadsheet and I want to build it, I have not put that in the shop. I might throw it up today when I do this podcast episode just to help you guys. But that's the other piece is, can you take up all the information, give them clear step-by-step so they're not focusing on what they need to do next. They're just coming in and implementing. If you love this episode or you have any questions, my DMs are always open. And if you are someone who has a specific topic that you want me to talk about, go ahead and send me a DM. I will see you in the next episode of Salesy the Podcast.